Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Seahawkers podcast. Frank Clark returning to the Seahawks. We are going to talk about it with our roundtable of Seahawkers Network co-hosts and a special guest coming on the show, former Seahawks defensive end Cliff Avril. Let's get to it. This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandon Schultz of the Military Seahawkers, and this is a special episode of the show as Frank Clark returns to the Seahawks. And we've got none other than former Seahawks defensive end Cliff Avril joining the show here in a little bit. And I'm going to talk to him about the transaction. But before we get there, I wanted to get a reaction from some of our other fellow members of the Seahawkers Podcast Network. I'm joined by my good buddy Adam Emmert and Mr. Phil Leidick. Phil, I see you're in the car. What was your reaction when you saw that Frank Clark returning to our Seahawks in Throwback Week? We're throwing it back to Frank Clark.
Yeah, and he can't wear the 55 because Dre already has it, so he doesn't totally get a throwback. I wonder what number. Has anybody heard what number he's getting?
Yeah, he actually hit up Draymond about the cost. He said he never got a response back, and so that he felt like that was the answer. He's going back to his college number 57.
Cool. Well, Dre gets $1 million per game. I don't think Dre is going to be easily moved off that number. But you want my take on Frank coming?
Let's hear it.
Okay. I think it's reasonable. I think it made a lot of sense as I kept listing the options. He's not going to replace Uchenna. We know that. But what I can't abide is for us to really drop back on defending the edge. And I was a little concerned about his energy there, but his desire to defend the edge. But several guys been mentioning the tape. I've looked. He does seem really consistent and disciplined at that. Does he still have the explosion to burn around the edge or mess people up to get to the quarterback? No, I don't think he's what he was back when he played with Jaron. But speaking of Jaron, a lot of people didn't think Jaron could do a lot coming here. And when the two of them have been together, a lot of times they play pretty good. And we have, for obvious passing downs, we have Taylor. And Taylor, who's the man I don't want to see when we are defending the run. And so I think that this could keep us close to the same defense we've had, as close as we could without trading big things that we don't want to trade away to get one of those big names.
Adam, what was your thoughts when you saw the news come across?
Yeah, okay, fine. I mean, I know, like, I saw some other YouTube headlines and things like that. Oh my gosh, Frank Clark returns to Seattle, and a lot of whatever. I mean, at this point in his career, and I'm not trying to diminish Frank Clark at all. Like, he's had an awesome career, dude. A career that you can easily be proud of when he ever does hang him up. I think he's been a fine player throughout his career. But at this point in his career, he's kind of just a dude. And when I say this is kind of a meh for me, like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, this isn't a bad move. It's not a great one either. It's fine. It's fine. And Phil mentioned it. I wasn't real high on bringing back Jared Reed. I think I said about the same thing. Could be proven wrong again. And I hope so. That'd be great. As far as regular season, Frank Clark, yeah, he's just a guy. He's just a guy. Like, that's just where he is at this point in his career. And that's kind of what they needed. Somebody to come in and play the rotation. If it keeps Darrell Taylor off the field a bit more, I'm happy for it. I know, Phil, you mentioned, he's good against he's good as a pass rusher. We still got Darrell Taylor. Is he? I haven't seen anything out of Darrell Taylor this year and towards the end of last year that maybe be like, oh, the light's actually finally coming on. And he's not good against the run. Like, I'm just done with Darrell Taylor. So who cares there? But playoff Frank Clark? Frankie playoff? That seems compelling to me. He had 2.5 sacks last year for the Chiefs in the playoff on their run to winning the trophy. So just depends on what you're expecting out of the guy. I think it's fine. It's not going to totally replace Uchenna. But again, if it helps keep Darrell Taylor off the field, that sounds good to me.
And Snyder knows we're going to the playoffs. So we're getting the man who is third all time in the history of playoff sacks on our team at age 30 to terrorize teams in the playoffs.
And you know me, I'm a sentimental guy, and bringing him back the same week that we throw on the throwback uniforms, listening to Frank Clark in his introductory press conference, returning to the team. There were a couple really cool nuggets about it, hearing that he had been in talks with the team about potentially joining them in the offseason. That didn't work out, but they're trying to make that happen. So now with an opening on the team, able to make that work. The guy sounds much more mature than I remember. He sounds a lot more happy than I remember. I'm trying to rack my brain to where I heard a happy Frank Clark interview. And so it was just kind of refreshing to hear Frank like happy to be back. He talked about raising his kids and being a dad. And it's just, all these things that I don't remember associating with Frank Clark during his time with the Seahawks. So it was cool to see that part of it from his return press conference. And yeah, if we get, some semblance of a run stopper with Frank Clark, a guy who can come in and make those types of plays, and then we get playoff Frank Clark once that time rolls around, sign me up.
And we're going to play a lot of good running teams. I mean, awesome running teams in this next stretch here. And we can't have Darrell Taylor on the football field. So I'm glad that there's a chance we're going to have somebody else there, because the Niners love the edge. The Browns run everywhere. Lamar and the Ravens love to run. The Rams run like crazy now. I just can't have Taylor on the field unless it's like 3rd and 57.
Well, enough Darrell Taylor slander. How about we get to Cliff Avril, who is going to be joining us, and well, he's going to be joining me. You guys, you can get on out of here. I'm going to talk to Cliff and hear what he has to say about the signing of Frank Clark. Let's get to it. Today on the show, I am joined by former Seahawks defensive end Cliff Avril. During his 10-year career with the Seahawks, Seahawks and Detroit Lions, but he earned a Pro Bowl nod. He's a member of the Seahawks Super Bowl 48 championship team. Cliff, welcome to the show.
Man, thank you guys for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, I'm happy to have you too. One of my favorite players of that era. So this is a big moment for me to be able to talk to you. And I can tell just by the background, we are talking today about the Courtyard by Marriott. They have partnered with you to spotlight the ultimate Seattle Seahawks fan room that is available to book now at the Courtyard by Marriott Downtown Seattle, Lake Union. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But Cliff, we have some big Seahawks news to talk about too. News came out Thursday morning. Frank Clark, your former teammate, returning to the team. What was your reaction?
I'm excited. Frank's like my little brother. Just having him back in town, I think it's going to be a good look. I think the biggest thing outside of just his play, Frank knows what it looks like to win championships. He knows what a great team looks like, right? He's been to three Super Bowls. I think they've won 2, been to the Pro Bowl. So having somebody like that in the locker room, I think is going to be huge, especially for all the young players that are in there. He knows what he's talking about now.
Yeah, and I have to think I wasn't sure if a reunion would even happen. I mean, we've seen a lot of guys leave and come back, right? We've seen Bobby go down to the Rams, come back, and other players that make their way back to the Seahawks. But, with Frank's situation, it's a little bit different because he was traded away. And I wonder if you had any insight in just to how some of the feelings that go into that and how it made it okay to come back.
Well, being traded away, Frank also went inside a huge contract, so there can't be too mad, all right? But I think, honestly, as guys get older, you start to realize how much of a business it is. No, you can't take it personal, right? And in the moment, you might take it personal, but the fact that he's still playing 4 or 5 years later, once he left, he signed a big contract. He's done a lot of great stuff since he's left. So I can't see him being frustrated or mad because he still signed. He wanted to come back. He signed, right? So collectively, I think it's a great move for him. I doubt he has any bad feelings. He just understands that it's just business right now.
The loss of Uchenna Nwosu is a big bummer for the team. Yeah. Is this move going to be enough for the defensive line, or do you think that they should do more ahead of the trade deadline?
You can always add more depth. The one thing people forget sometimes with that Super Bowl run that we had, that first Super Bowl that we won, Mike Bennett and myself, we weren't starters. We had a lot of depth, right? We had a lot of guys. You just roll the guys in and we're coming. So you can always add more depth. I'm a big believer in that. But also in the secondary, we had the same exact thing with Brian Maxwell. He wasn't a starter that year, right? So being able to have guys that can come in and the pace, the level of play doesn't drop off, I think is huge. And so if you can continue to keep adding that, I think it's okay. But if not, I do think they have young players that can get after the quarterback. Jaron Reed, I think, is the centerpiece of it all, though, up front. Without him, with him, I think everything kind of clicks. He's a leader. He's a general out there. So I think they have the players, but adding some depth, I don't think is ever bad.
Yeah, I feel like that year that we saw the best production out of both Frank and Jaron Reed, it was a year that they were together and they both had, I feel like they both had double digit sacks or close to it. And do you think that, has it been too much time or can they go back and recreate some of that?
I think they can, because now they're a little bit wiser. They have more experience. They understand the game a lot better. I mean, at that time they were young pups. You know what I mean? They were still trying to figure things out. So now that they actually understand the game, they understand how people are going to block them, understand schemes. I think it gets a little bit more interesting for both of them, and they both, I think, can bounce back and probably rekindle some of that and hopefully be able to go get double digits again.
So as a pass rusher, just from your experience, what are some of those things that you learned earlier in your career that benefited you late in career that allowed you to do things that maybe you wouldn't have done earlier on when you were younger?
I think one of the main things, first thing that comes to mind early in my career is I didn't understand the silent count, and also understanding the play clock. I'm going to give you a little game, I guess. But the play clock, what I do know is, especially if you're playing at home, once it gets under 10 seconds, they can't double count, they can't audible out of it because there's not enough time to be able to do that, right? If I would have known that earlier in my career, maybe I don't know, maybe I don't make it back to Seattle because I have way more sacks or something crazy like that. But that was able to help me with the speed of the game with these younger guys coming in, and I'm still understanding I can jump the snap count. So that kept me still as quick as I was, say, earlier in my career, because that split second of knowing when they're going to snap the ball. So something as small as that, I think, went a long way later in my career.
What's impressed you about this Seahawks 2023 team?
Man, they got some young players that can get after it, man. Especially you talk about some of these DBs, these young DBs, impressive. I think the coolest thing of it all is just seeing how well John Snyder and Coach Carroll drafted, because these young players are making some things happen. I think that defense looks really good on the back end. I think up front, the guys are figuring themselves out. They're figuring it out. Mafe, the young pass rusher, every time I see him or I see Coach Carroll, like, hey, he reminds me of you, man. He reminds me of you. Like, the difference is consistency, right? I had 10 years, but he has the potential though. And I think, and he's showing it this year. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see him. Collectively, I think that defense just looks thirsty and they're hungry and they're out there making some things happen.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch Boy this year. It's fun to see you in this hotel room here at Courtyard by Marriott, the official hotel partner for the NFL for 13 years. And they're offering access to NFL experiences this week. They're teaming up with you, Cliff, to unveil the ultimate Seattle Seahawks fan room. And I live in Montana, so I'm someone who travels to Seahawks games. I'm always looking for a good place to stay. Yeah. What is the ultimate Seahawks fan room?
So as you can tell behind me, it's Seahawks everything. Whether you talk about the memorabilia, talk about the lights in here, it's blue and green. Got jerseys, they got footballs, they got all kinds of stuff that a true 12, only true 12s would really appreciate, and I think it's really cool. Just as a fan to be able to walk into a space where your team is represented to the fullest, I think it's pretty cool. So if you go to courtyard.com to be able to check that out and be able to get the opportunity to be able to get one of these rooms, I think it's dope.
Yeah. And as a true 12 myself, one of my favorite bits of trivia, Cliff, is that you went from a winless team in Detroit to a team that won the Super Bowl. Is that meaningful to you at all?
Oh, well, 1,000. I mean, honestly, the biggest thing from that, and I live my life like this, is it doesn't matter how you start. Because that was my rookie year. I went 0-16, right? But if you continue to put the work in, if you continue to have faith in the process, great things can happen. So I went from 0-16 to going to the Super Bowl, to being a part of one of the best defenses ever, but not only just like being on the team, like I played a role in that defense, right? So like being able to be a part of something like that is very special. And I tell my guys all the time, that won the Super Bowl. I'm like, I think it meant just a little bit more to me than some of those guys, because none of those guys went 0-16. Nobody went through that type of struggle outside of myself on that team. So it was amazing. It was amazing to be able to do that.
I love it. As you mentioned, you can go to courtyard.com. Also coming up, there's the Ultimate Upgrade, which is a Courtyard Super Bowl sleepover in Las Vegas. And by staying at a Marriott or visiting one, anybody can get in on that potential too of doing the Super Bowl sleepover in Vegas. And
well, don't just go over that one. No, don't just go over that one, because sleepover in Vegas is pretty dope.
Okay.
They turn a whole a suite in the actual stadium. They turn it into a suite where you can basically you stay in the night. You're gonna be the first ones in the stadium before they have kickoff or anything like that. You're gonna beat the players there, right? So I think honestly, I want to try to win that, because I think that's just gonna be a super cool experience to be able to stay the night in the stadium, and I'll obviously stay throughout the day to be able to see the game as well.
Hey, not having to travel to the game, just being there already.
Yes.
That's enough of an experience right there. Cliff, really want to thank you for coming on, and just a great time talking to you.
No, I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
And that's going to do it for today's show. A big thanks to Cliff Avril coming on the show and unveiling that ultimate Seattle Seahawks fan room. That's going to be fun for anyone who is able to travel to Seattle. Check that out. If you do, I want to hear from you. Let me know, how was it? Because, hey, Adam, when we go to Seattle, you don't want to sleep in a boring hotel room. You got to have the Seahawks sheets, feel like you're, 10 years old again, and you have your Seahawks themed room. Hey, when you're in your 40s, you can throw it back to when you're a kid and have that feeling once again.
Heck yeah. That's why my camper is decorated like this room supposedly is. And I put on my Seahawks Luke Wilson inspired onesie and snuggle up in there and have a camp out. So yeah, I get it, man. You don't want to stay in a boring ass hotel room. Stay in a cool one.
Stay in a cool one. And I think with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.